Okay, so here we have a window valance, another one that I've almost completely finished. I've got it all assembled. I just got to do some patching of some holes, and I've got a first coat of, I've got primer on it, and then a first coat of paint. I'll do my patching now that I've got the first coat of paint on, and then I'll do the final coat of paint, and that'll be the window blocks. We've got this back piece here, piece of wood, or plywood rather, that we've cut a groove. Cut that groove with our table saw. Let's put a light on. So we've got this on the window box. It's just almost finished painting, a little patching left, and we have a little piece of wood that's this strip at the back supporting this window box. That's what we put our screws through into the wall later when we're putting it up. And get our piece of, this piece of plywood is one I cut for that top piece. It's approximately 7 inches wide, and I usually make these window valance about 7 inches tall and 7 inches wide, or deep, whatever way you want to refer to it. And you cut this groove with, I use the table saw. If you have a router set up, you could use that as well. Or if you don't have, I'll get a friend to do this for you. Cut that groove, and I cut that groove for this piece of plywood I have here for the top, and I've got the length of this. You can see on here that it's not an exactly perfect length. I didn't notch it for this side panel that I put in. You won't see that from the floor anyways. Once you have this up, you won't even see that. But if you like, you could, if you have that left over, you can fill that with some filler and paint over it. I may do that still. But I start off by assembling this top piece into that back board that nailing board or board that I used to screw it to the wall. And you can see this is all just scrap plywood that's previously used. It's got nail holes or screw holes in that, and a hole was drilled in it. Not that big a problem. I'll just fill these, and when after I paint it, and it'll all disappear. So we just decide what we want for the top. You can see I pressure washer this old stained plywood. All of these are built out of old wood and scrap bits. But once you paint it, you won't be able to see any of those problems anymore. Let's move that up. Start assembling. Get some glue. We get our glue out, and that we've got cut into this board. I usually like to use 1/2 inch plywood for this, but this scrap I have here is only 3/8. It will still work. And the reason why it will still work, I guess, is because on the underside, I add this additional block in here for nailing, and I put glue on it and nail it in between, and I actually notch around these supports. I guess I should sand that rough edge off. I never sanded that one before I painted it. And I put this little block of wood in here for extra support. I glue it in and nail it in, and I do it on the other side as well, and that makes it very stiff. These are actually quite strong. You can, sometimes we put ornaments on top of these that sometimes weigh 20, maybe even 30 pounds of ornaments sitting on these. The only problem is that if you leave that much weight on there over time, it probably would start to warp this plywood, but it won't break it. So we do that, we put that glue in that groove, and then we decide which way we want, up or down, and they're both are quite dirty, and just it's old plywood. So it was previously used, but we're not going to throw it away because we're going to paint it anyway, so we might as well make something useful out of it. And go this way down. I'm just putting it in here. This border I'm sticking into this groove here is probably going to have to be trimmed off. And I have a flush cut router bit that I can cut that with, or run a, I got a belt sander I can trim it off with. But if you want to take the time and measure things more precisely, you can do that. It won't hurt. But once we put this together, should be pretty decent here. We do this. I'm going to put some clamps on this, and hopefully this will work out for me. If you don't have clamps, you can just simply put them together. Usually I don't even bother with clamping, but this whole piece of wood was a bit wonky, and I ended up cutting the groove a little wider in one spot. I was using the table saw, not the router, and it ended up one edge I didn't realize was uneven. And so now my groove is wider in one spot. Normally I would just put glue in and nail it down, but that didn't work out this time. So we will put some clamps on there. Having a little issue with my air compressor, so I'm using my little cordless nailer. This is 18 gauge brad nails. And this seems to work, and I'll just shoot some nails in and come out the back slightly, but this will help hold this in place with the glue on the ends where I'm not clamping it. There's the right angle. I put it in the proper angle. I get good grip without coming out the back. So that's what I'm trying for. Just try and get that angle where it will stay in the wood. And you can see right here there's a gap. And that's where I had a warp in, well, the edge of the plywood, because I was reusing it, was not straight. And I didn't realize that until afterwards, so I ended up having to flip it over and trim it slightly. But in the meantime, I had already started the groove on that edge, and now it's a little wider in this one area. But we'll still make that work. I'm going to put that block in there, support block, and I'll glue it and nail it, and it'll cover up that gap, and that'll still be quite strong when it's done. And throw a few nails in from the other side. And I've got it nailed down a little bit. There we go. Got some nails in there. I'll leave that clamp on there for a little while. And that will be the top portion of this window box. That's this piece here and this part here. And we need to put these supports on, and this is where you hook the metal bar or plastic bar or whatever you're going to use to support your curtain rod, if you want to call it. I just use a piece of plastic electrical pipe. You could use plastic plumbing pipe with stiffer, like a Schedule 40 PVC plumbing pipe would work. These are going to be placed on the ends, in the center, and on the other end again, I guess. And they get glued on, and this would be the top surface here of the valance. So you won't see this from the floor at all. So you can actually just nail into it once you glue this. But to get this where you want it, you need to have your piece of wood. And here's my scrap bit of plywood that I'm using for that. I'm going to sand this a bit before I paint it or put it together. I think I'll quickly sand this so that paint will stick to it. Got a sander here, so I'll just sand that. But we will glue these pieces on in the meantime. And I set this so it's flush on the front, and these pieces go this way so that when it's up, right side up, this hook will support our curtain rod. So we'll put it upside down, and that edge there is to nail this front piece onto. So we put that, and we position it where it's going to be, and we get this flush, these two pieces flush here on that front edge, and that's where that's going to sit once it's measured up. So that's how far back that would need to be. And we do that for the ends as well. We set them up so that would be flush, and that piece would be right where it's going to be flush. And we take our end pieces, and these two pieces of wood I've got here aren't the exact same. They're not quite the exact same width. This one is slightly thinner. It's a different scrap I had. But since I'm painting, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to match my front edge. And that means on the back side, they won't match properly. They'll be slightly off. It'll look appear to be slightly off. Well, it doesn't matter. But we're going to set these in, the end ones in, that width. So that this is flush here on that corner piece like that. And this other one will be flush with this. And I've cut this in a way, this is a little wider than this piece. This piece here, and this piece here, the back piece there, this is actually the same as those two together. From that's flush, these are flush at the back here. This is flush with this edge when I have got it assembled, and this point is flush with that corner. So that's what we were trying to do there. But this is the bottom side, so this could end up being in place like this. And the front edge would be on top of that. When we get those, what we're going to do is we're going to start with gluing these on the right setback that these side and front pieces can glue onto, and we'll have them glued down and supported that way. So it's a matter of get some lines marked and get some lines marked here. scribing a line with a screw. It's on utensil at the moment, so lightly scribe that. It just kind of scratches the old paint that's left on here a bit. I've scuffed this a little bit, but I'm going to scuff it again with my sander after, so more paint will stick to this. But first I'll put these pieces on here. I need to find a ruler to place this other one in the center. So what we'll do is we'll go like this. This is approximately the center mark. I'll make a scratch on this little piece of wood and then I'll turn it over. And we'll see how far apart they are. From there to there, I think my center mark is actually going to be closer to that. So I will remark this. And I'll put a little arrow on my board so I know which one I'm going to be using. And I put it there and I put another scratch on there. And my two marks are about 3/8 of an inch apart. So if I get it fairly close to that, it should be good enough. And I will make sure it's square here. I'll run that square and I'll tip it up to about where it should be. I'll strike my lines. And that should be it. Now, I'm going to put my piece on top here to scribe the front edge. So I'll get that flush. And I'll just scribe a line there that makes it flush in the ends. So do that, do that. There, got a little marked out there. But now that I've put this up here and I've noticed that this piece of scrap plywood is a little bit off from what I wanted originally, so I'm going to have to set this back a bit. And I'll lose a little bit off each end. I think about 1/8 of an inch off of each end is what I'm going to end up losing to get this centered properly. So what I will do is on these ends here, is I will set this in 1/8 of an inch, and I'll come to the forward mark here when I glue and nail it down, and then I'll take my trim bit on the router and trim that off after I've got that assembled. It should work out okay. The only thing is when I do that, I end up routering only until I can get up to this block at the back, and then I use my sander to sand off the rest of it for that little bit. Doesn't take too long. I had one other turn out this way. It's just when you're reusing this old wood, sometimes you have problems with the ends and you have to trim them up to get them so they'll work a little better. And that's what I'm going to do. That's how I chose to fix that, and just kind of cover it up, I guess. I guess that's the nice thing about not having a finished wood grain. We're painting over it, and we can actually cover a lot of blemishes, especially when we're making mistakes. This should be good. We'll check that. The line's up the line okay. So that's good. And we will attempt to put this one down a bit. hopefully we don't mess it up. There we go. Got one nail kind of holding it in place. Not really stable just yet, but hope that nail didn't go all the way in. And got that one in. That's better. Now we've got that in there. We have that other nail that didn't quite go in all the way. You can just pop that in, that final bit with pliers or a hammer or whatever you got. And that will leave these divots in here. We'll be filling that in, but remember this was old. There's other potholes and holes and screw holes in here that we're going to do some filler on, and we'll paint over all that. Of course, like I said, if you were going to try and get a wood green finish and you just wanted to use a light stain and a clear coat, and you want to have like natural wood colors, you would never use this old wood like this. It has too many blemishes, but it works okay if you're painting. And you just need a little bit of patching, and it'll look quite good when it's done. Okay, we've got this inside portion sanded off, scuffed up so that it will actually adhere to some paint. When painting this, I use a primer that will stick to this quite well, and then your paint will adhere better when you use a primer. This one I had tinted to a darker color. This came out like a Pepto-Bismol color, but the stain was a very dark plum red color that I went over top of this with, and I put this on first so my solid stain would adhere better to some shingles on the exterior of the building. I've got lots of this paint here, and that's what I've been putting on these window valance. And then I cover it with 2 coats of white paint, or sometimes 3, depends on what I need, and until this is completely gone, the color from this paint has completely disappeared and covered. But this is how I get bonding onto these surfaces. I sand them the best I can, and then I put this primer on, and then I put my paint on. And I'm actually using a doors and trim paint to paint these window boxes. Okay, I caught myself calling them window boxes again. They're window valance. I get corrected by other people quite often. So I'm going to glue this piece on. Start off. We set it to that front edge like we needed to. And the line I scribed before, I needed to move in 1/8 of an inch from the ends, because the piece I had made for it had to be trimmed a little bit because it's a bit wonky. It still may not work that well, but I will get as close as I can, and I'll probably have to use some wood filler in the corner. The piece of plywood I've got is warped on the ends. It's got quite quite a shape to it, so I'm hoping that I can get it to flatten out for me in the corner a bit. Once I get it onto these blocks, it might work out okay. But if it doesn't, it'll be close enough that I can fill the corner with some wood filler. So I've got that block on. Oh, I needed that piece for spacing, to check my spacing on the edge. And shift that so it's flush on that outside edge again. And I'm setting in 1/8 of an inch from that line I had made so that I can get you see where my fingers are, and I'm shooting the nail in a slightly different location. And the nail is shorter than the wood that I'm nailing into, so there's pretty low chance, I'm hoping, of injuring myself. And we're just going to nail this on here. And got that. And this time I've actually got them set up on there. You can see where these, or where that bar will support the curtain rod, and these side plates with the cutout 45 will be glued onto here, and they'll cover up the end of those curtain rods when you assemble that. And this front piece is also cut out a 45 on the end to match that, and it sits on those like so, and they match in the corner. When you get this all put together, I also put that thin block of wood between these. I put a thin block of wood, I cut it to length and set it in there, and put a row of nails. I put glue on it and a row of nails there, and then I have a place for this to nail along at the top edge. And when I'm done all of that, when I'm done assembling all that, I take a trim board, whatever trim board you want to put on there, whatever pattern you have, or if you want to make your own. I quite often make my own, but here's a little piece of trim board, and I simply cover up that raw edge of the plywood on the top. I go flush, and then I go just past a little bit. And I cut the 45s in the corner, and I go right around on the top edge, and then I put a smaller molding usually on the bottom, and I quite often will make those myself. I have a little piece of quarter round. You could just put your little molding on there, and I glue that on, clamp it, and I have some shorter nails that I can nail into that if this is big enough. Sometimes they're not big enough, but whatever you put on there. But this edge here is not really strong, but it doesn't need to be. It's mostly just decorative, hanging down there. The structure happens up here on this top board, and this front piece is just tacked onto these, or in the corners, where the trim boards hide, and glue. And then I don't nail up in the center portion here where I don't have a trim board hiding. I won't put any nails into that. And that way we don't have unnecessary holes to fill in. And that's how I get those. I'm not going to say window boxes, I'm going to say valance. Valance, and that's how I put those in. So let's put a couple more nails in this. And again, that's the top edge, or top side. You won't see that from the floor. You can still fill those with holes with some filler, and it's all getting painted anyways. And you can see these are made out of scrap plywood. This really is scrap plywood. All this was previously enjoyed plywood, and I'm reusing it. I don't like to throw anything away. So here we go. We've got this. You can see I've taken this, I've got some millwork. I made this bottom piece with a router bit and just scraps of wood that I've got, that I've cut up, like these thin ones, and I've run them router bit over the top of them and made this shape for the bottom piece. And this is just a piece of colonial, cheap colonial baseboard or trim board. I have a piece here, and here's another piece. This is a slightly different than those others, but I've trimmed this one down to the same size because this was a colonial and it had a wider piece on the top. This was quite tall. It was too tall to put on here, so I simply cut it off on the table saw, and that's how I'm going to finish this one. This is my last one, and I don't have enough of the other board. Oh. Tripping over this shed or barn is a little too small for all the stuff that's in here. But here's the other one. I don't have enough to do this, so I will use this other one, which is a little beaten up, but I've trimmed it off, and I'll get enough of it out of this one. I'll sand that edge so it's more rounded on that leading edge there at the top, and we'll cut that to go around it, and we'll finish that up that way. And that's how I'm going to make this box. I'm going to keep going, I guess, and try to get the other bits together. We'll glue this one on now. We'll set this in 1/8 of an inch off this edge further than we to allow for what we've had to trim off that panel, piece of plywood here that we've got for that edge. We'll make sure this is flush again here on the corner. We've got that flush. We're doing that on the other end. Well, now this is nailed in. I can show you better what I'm doing here. I make this plywood flush right here to the goal and in the center, and this piece comes to the corner. I'll put this one to match up to it, and then I match these into the corner here when I'm done. I've set this back an extra 1/8 of an inch here because I plan on trimming this off. It needs to be trimmed off, and that's to allow for this piece of plywood being a little shorter due to a little bit of problems with it. This is old used plywood. You can see this was a filler piece above a cabinet, and these window valance are actually being made for that house that these cabinets came out of. They had a new kitchen put in, and I've taken the scrap from their new cabinets, or from the old cabinets that were the filler panel at the top above the cupboards, and that's what that is. And the other pieces of plywood I've got are these top pieces. I believe this was a piece of plywood they had underneath a piece of plywood with some ceramic tile on it that they had a washer and dryer just outside their kitchen on, and they were going to throw that away. They had new flooring put in the kitchen in that back area where the laundry was, and that was another piece of plywood that we saved from that. Yeah, we're just using plywood, another chunks of plywood I got from other projects. So we will finish gluing this on. This is the flush here. On this corner, and it is set back the 1/8 of an inch we needed from the end. So now we can nail it down, I guess. those pieces on there, and get these things up here. Slowly square it up a little bit. Now we're going to glue on our end pieces for the plywood, or side panels, I guess, whatever you want to call them. We'll be the glue in there, on this edge, around this hook. This will help bond everything together nicely. And this is our lead edge, and then this panel will be on top of this. So we need this where we cut the 45 to sit up on that edge. We're going to set this about even with this front edge here. And when we do that, this is set back an eighth of an inch from here because of the issue I had before. I'll have to work at that a little bit probably later to make that look better. But we will pull out these long nails now. Probably a whole bunch. Let's put that in there. And I've dropped my piece. It didn't sit. It's fine. We will back up there. Back up in place. Set it back up. It should have been. Flush with that front edge, and we will nail. See, I will nail here, and show you what that does. These nails that I put along here, and if I go low enough down here, I can put a nail in this corner, down close to this edge. I get a nail in there, and what happens is when I do my trim board after, even if I use a small one, along that bottom edge, that nail would be covered by my little narrow trim board. And at the top, I'm using a slightly bigger one, so I can bring my nails, I can actually bring those nails down further down, and you can see the trim board. See, it covers that one nail if I put a thin trim board on there. And I'm going to go around that corner with that. And I'll take a piece of trim board and just show you how that would cover those nails. And from the floor, you would see this face. You wouldn't see this top portion at all. And you'll see that other little trim here. And they look pretty good when they're done. I have a little bit of hole filling to do on them. Here, this one has one coat of paint on it, and I need to put some filler, maybe some caulking, probably latex caulking. There's some nail holes in here from when I was nailing on the trim. I'll fill in those gaps and cracks now that I've got a coat of paint on here, and then it will look a lot better. The nail holes, there's some blemishes I'll fill in, and then I'll put the final coat of paint on, and they will look a lot better when they're done. And you can see that the nails that I used to nail on the plywood are covered by this trim board. So it's coming along pretty good. Okay, so we have this board here. We're going to put, or plywood, whatever you want to call it. I guess it's plywood. So I guess it would be technically a sheet, just cut down to narrow strip. Now we're going to put this in place here, and I'm going to show you this end here where you can see where the plywood is actually warped. I'm going to put glue on it, and and nail it down, and probably put 2 clamps on there and there on both sides to help hold it in place. I don't have much to clamp to, so I can't clamp a lot because it's just this thin plywood that you put the clamp pressure against. So I don't want to clamp it too hard, but I'll need to flatten down to try and get that warp out of the end of the wood there, and that's how I'm going to do this. You can see I'm not lying about this as being previously enjoyed plywood because there's nail holes here, all along here, but my trim on that'll be the top edge. My trim board will hide that, and I also have that other nailing strip that I'm putting in there for extra support. And when I'm done, it should be quite strong, and we'll hide all the blemishes. And that's what we'll do. So let's get some glue on this into these joints here. And I won't bother gluing that edge on this. I'm going to wait till I put that nailing strip in, because I've done that before and I ended up spreading the glue all over the place and got very little on the joint where I wanted it. So I think I'll wait and put the nailing strip in. But if you have a better way of holding this stuff still, then that would make it stronger. I think by the time I put that nailing strip in there and run a big bead of glue through there, it'll be very strong. And I will center this up to where it's going to be sitting. I'll get this quite good there. And yeah, that's where that's going to be sitting. And we'll actually nail this one in place right here. Not going to move around as much. That's that center support. And I'm also needed to square this up a little bit. So I have a block here that's square on one edge, and I will need to square this up just a little bit, and nail that in. I've caused myself, I've scuffed that a little bit more. Oh, not too bad. I slipped off a little bit with my nailer. Luckily it's got a nice soft plastic tip there. When I slid it didn't leave a gouge. So gotta be careful with that stuff. Now I've got that nailed into the center, it's not going to move around on me too much. I can muck around with this end and those clamps that I was talking about before. Put a clamp on. Put a clamp on and tighten it up. And put a little bit of pressure on it. Not too much. Remember, that's thin plywood there, so we can't really get a lot of pressure on it. And it is seated up against this way, so we can put a nail or two in there, I think, close to that. Okay. Nail those in there a little bit. And we'll put the other clamp on over here. See that we get close on that, hopefully. Good. Let's throw some nails in that now. And let that dry.
I'm going to leave them clamps on for a little while. There's a bit of pressure under that still, and those nails could pop right through. A lot of spring pressure under that wood. Now you can see that my corner is a little wonky. I was worried about that because when I was cutting it, I had a lot of issue, but that's what happened when you use plywood. So I'm going to just fill that little corner there with some filler after, or caulking even, because I'm painting it white. It won't matter. It would fill right in. But it'll work out. I'll put that back on there. Up on me a bit. There we go. It's good. Put that up there. All right. And I'm going to be off camera to nail down the other end, I believe. Yeah, I will be. Leave that end over there so that it will stay clamped. Clamps aren't on tight enough to even support their own weight. They want to slide off. Got that. I think I may have put a couple nails in spots that might not cover with my trim boards, but I'm going to have to live with it. I'm going to use filler on that corner anyway. And this one's not so good as well. So I'm going to be using filler on both corners anyway, so I guess it won't matter if I have extra nail holes showing. But this is what we've got to this point, and we will need to shift ourselves around here a bit to do some cutting. Set this to 45. It needs to be. Make sure it's fully seated at the 45 mark. So we didn't cut off to this edge here, not to this top board, because we have to trim that 1/8 of an inch on both ends. So we can mark this for length by putting this inside bit to here, and the inside bit to there, and we'll mark the inside of our 45 here. So we need to have the other 45 going to that point. Okay, make sure we're fully seated at the 45 on that. We'll bring ourselves into this thing. We'll leave this a little bit longer than it needs to be. The board doesn't want to stay there, it's warped. We've got a warped board here. to cut this. Okay. We'll cut that off, and we've cut it a little bit long. It's a warped piece, so I don't want to cut it to length because it may not work out. I will cut off the other two end pieces. And gotta find a piece that's not too marked up here because this was an old beaten up piece of wood we had here. I don't want it to be too rough. A little bit of filler in some of these, and those will only need to be, we'll cut those off. So now I made these a little bit longer than they need to be when I'm setting them up. I will be able to see where we are with that, if that's setting up well. So when we're doing this front edge, let's see if I can get that to work now. So we're going to set that on that front edge. I got the clamps in the way on the other end. And we're going to set these on there when we nail them down. It's not matching up the clamps or any way, but I will nail those down, glue them and nail them down, and I'll match them up. But before I do, I'll line these things up and I mark them. I mark them here for length. I cut them off. Mark them for length. I do one end here, seat it up to that fully. Then I measure this long piece and cut it exactly to fit. Once I got these two ends put on, and then I get this to exactly fit between, and that seems to be the easiest way for me to get it so everything lined up nicely. And I'll put this back on here. The weight of those clamps is twisting it a bit. You can tell it's already quite strong, even though the glue isn't fully set, it's still fairly strong. Once I get the other little pieces of wood nailing strips underneath here, this will be quite a strong box. It will hold quite a weight, like I said before. I've made these and had 20 or 30 pounds of ornaments sitting on top of them. This I've made, the windows are fairly narrow, they're about 30 inches wide, and these are about 47 inches wide, I think. So you give yourself a little bit of room on each side for your curtains to pull off away from the window. I've made these, I believe the longest one I made was about 12 feet long. And I left a seam in the middle where I had a decorative molding that covered the seam, so you couldn't even see where the seam was on that. And the trim boards I cut on, they were, you can get them long enough, but I had pieces and I had cut them on angles, 30-degree angles, so that I could hide the joints, and they were in different locations, so they were quite well hidden, and it was about 12 feet long, I believe, and that was the longest one I built, and it was quite strong. I didn't use a 1/4 inch material here. I used the actual 1/2 inch on the front piece, and I used a 3/4 inch top piece for that one, and I did a router groove for the 1/2 inch to sit into that router groove, and I glued it in. I didn't use blocks of wood, so it was very strong because it was all plywood. It was all new plywood for that one as well, and the back edge was also the 1/2 inch. So if you want to make a really big or really long one, it works really well, and it's quite strong. They look nice if you like that sort of thing. Okay, we're gonna put our little nailing blocks in here. We need to mark them out for where they're gonna be located. I have to make this one with notches in it for these braces or hooks, or I guess they're dual function. They're hooks and braces. Let me move that marker just a little bit. And I need to remove some material in those areas. I'll mark this. So we will try and make this fit this location, and some notches in there, we straight in here, and that fits in there quite good. Small gaps, I guess, but I will, now that I got that to fit quite close, I will put a whole bunch of glue in here. Put down in this joint here. This will add a lot of strength to the box. We'll got quite a bit of glue in there. We'll put some of these cutout locations. A little bead along here. Here. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong side. Bead along here. And here. It's close. I think that's it. No, this edge. Again, I'm wrong. Put glue on every side now. Well, we'll do this anyway. We'll get lots of glue on it. There. That should work. We'll do that in place now. Lots of extra glue on it. Every location. Small piece of it, I guess. Or something else. Have to rip off a little bit of excess glue, or glue we have put on locations. Not too bad. Like I said, you can get back at the top. Set that down somewhere. Don't want on the control box. We don't want on the table saw. So we'll send it over there on that board. And we'll nail this. More nails. The problem with this nailer is there's no easy way to oil it. I end up having to pull it open and oiling on the slide because it doesn't have, with the air nailer you just put a drop of oil in where the air hose attaches and it blows through the system and lubricates it that way. With this you have to actually oil the slide. So every once in a while I have to stop and oil this thing up so it will work. Got that in there. Put your glue in there. Try down. Pushes out.
can see how close that I've cut this piece for the block in here in the center portion. I'm just kind of roughly cut it, I guess, but I've done a few of them now, and that seems to work pretty good. Adds quite a bit of strength to this. When it's dry, this glue will help that block stiffen up the whole box. That's what it is. It's pretty much a wooden box. Put our nails different angles from each other so there'll be more grab. It won't pull out as easy. And that will dry up. And you can see how that's that back edge that makes that piece of plywood, that strip of plywood we use there for supporting this, you can see the glue is pushed out when we nailed it. It kind of sucks it together. But that will give us a lot more strength, so it won't pull off very easily. Anyway, I won't say it would be impossible, but it's a lot of strength. It gives it a lot more strength. We can, even though this isn't completely dry, set things on it. This tool is pretty heavy. I'll throw something else on there. That's pretty heavy. Oh, just to show you, and I'll pick it up by those tabs. And just kind of let you can see the pressure is on those tabs. Not pulling out, and it's not even fully dry yet, but showing you that there's some strength to this. When it's dry, these are quite strong. They don't need to be that strong because curtains don't weigh that much. These tools weigh a lot more than curtains. And you can put a few ornaments and whatnot on these shelves when you're done, if you so choose. Now I have another block to put in. I need to put another block in on that lead edge. So the front panel attaches to that, and that gives it a lot of strength when they're bonded together. It kind of gives it the kind of strength that you see in those laminated beams in new homes. That center rib is thin on those beams, but when they cap it with larger pieces of wood, they become very strong. When we put our finish trim on, that beefs up the bottom edge, and we put this nailing block in the top, that beefs up the top edge, as well as we are putting a trim board on the top, so it gives it more strength from both sides. So this ends up being quite strong structure when it's completed. It's already fairly strong, but when we're done, it's quite a bit stronger. That'd be one of these completed units, and they're quite robust, actually. I don't know how much they can hold up. Let's see if we can do this. Let's see if we can put this well, this is one of the complete ones there. You just stand on it. Yeah, see, it's fairly strong, even though it's just thin plywoods. You can stand on it there like that, and it's quite strong. Doesn't break, and that's due to these little blocks of wood that we put in there. Because if I had stood on that, it was just those thin bits of plywood, I probably would have broke it. Just put it in a little piece of sheeting. Now I gotta get all the dirt off the paint here. I gotta do a final coat on these anyway. But I just thought I'd show that for demonstration on strength. They are very strong, and they can hold your ornaments afterwards. Okay, nailing in the final pieces of the wood blocks. I've just glued them and nailed them in on this one side here. I believe it was this side. I'm doing this side now. I started, I glued it, put it in, nailed it on the front edge. Now I'm going to push down
on this top edge, and make sure that that board lines up on the front edge of the wood here, and push it together. So I'll put my hand underneath that block in behind there, and I'll nail a little bit away from my hand, just in case. And now keep that from pushing in. Now it lines up this way, because this piece here can warp while you're working with it. We'll do nails from different angles to help hold it in place. And we will add a few more nails. Strip the wood. Nails. So we'll add some more nails. One thing I don't like about this gun is it has about 4 or 5 nails. It won't shoot past that. There's a problem with the stop, the way it was designed. It doesn't want to shoot them last few nails. But other than that, it's quite good. And I missed a couple nails there on this side. Wood strip wasn't, just barely. It's the angle I shot them in, slightly on the angle. And pull them out. And we don't want to have curtains tall on those after the fact. Just pull them right through. Pliers. And now have bowls there to patch. So I'm patching bowls because this is plywood. And a little excess glue, I'll just push it down into the groove a little bit. And I'm priming this, so priming will stitch all this glue and everything else in here pretty good. And I will scuff it up a bit. Alright, now we've got the box together. We've got those pieces of wood strips that for stiffening in here. And they give this a lot of, they go up in this corner here and they give that a lot of strength. Now when we put our trim boards on, that'll add even more strength because I'll be gluing those on, and I'll put a few nails in here, as few as I possibly can. This was that larger board that I had cut off one edge, so it would be a more sensible size for this project. And I'm just going to ease that edge, it's kind of sharp. And that'll be not bad now. We'll such a sharp edge. And we will be placing those on there. And this is how I mark these pieces for length. I still have to trim this edge off. It's still an 1/8 of an inch long. I was showing this before. Now the box is nice and stiff. I can get these on here and I match them up until they fit. And if the angles of the box are slightly off, the trims might be slightly too. You can change your angles on your miter. This looks pretty good. That's not a bad seam. I can fill that with a little bit of filler when I nail it down. But it's not sitting exactly flat because I have this little edge on there still. You can trim them off with trim it on a router and then sand the rest off. We've got this right here. You can so I used my trim bit with the router to trim that up, so you can see it's a little bit of an eighth of an inch there. And what I'll do is I'll take this belt sander and sand that back there. You could use an ordinary sander, it'll take a little bit longer, but that's a small bit of material, it's thin plywood. It would sand down without too much effort. Or you could use a file or sandpaper by hand with a block. It would take a longer time, but small inconvenience, I guess, when you consider the size of the project. That's taken off half the material. We can go quite a bit faster if we have to. That's good. We'll do that on the other side. We'll get it flush. I've scuffed up this plywood a little bit with the sanding process. But again, we're going to be putting that trim board on there. We'll glue that on there, nail it down, and we won't have any problems with that. The actual piece we're using. Now I can take an accurate measurement, put that on there, glue and nail it. Gotta fill in some little scuffs on that. Again, we're not using brand new material, we're just using stuff we have. And there we go. That's how that's going to look. So we can do this and scribe the back of that for the length that we needed. And there's a little scratch mark on there for the length that we needed. We'll cut that off, and that'll be your length. Got that. And that should be perfect length there. So we will do the other one on the other side, and then we'll recut this one because it was a little longer to the actual size. Once we put that in there, we'll have 2 points. We'll put it up against one point, and then we'll hold it up to the other point and we'll mark it, and then we'll cut the angle again at that to match up to those points. And I find that's the easiest way for me to build these. As long as I build a box square, I don't have too many problems putting trims on. Okay, where we left off last time is we marked and cut off our 2 end pieces. I've since nailed them on, put some glue on them, and then nailed them in place. Now I've taken this other one where I've approximately cut it, and I've cut it a little bit closer now. And I'm going to maybe have to do a final adjustment on it for length. And we're pretty close. I think it could just be shaved off a hair. So we'll put it back on the saw and give it a quick touch just to get the exact length we wanted. nice there, I think. So I will glue it up and nail it in place. We'll put some glue on this piece of trim. There, put some on the top edge. Some on the bottom edge. And on the other end. Across there. There. So this will actually help the structure having this nailed on here. So we'll glue it up pretty good and line it up best we can. Nail it in place. Down. Glue dropped out from somewhere, put back in there. Try to position these. On there temporarily. And I missed on most of those nails. They were just slightly off that nailing board, putting it on a little bit more of an angle. It's a lot better. Got more grab on this. More there. Okay, so we'll have to break those nails out on those locations. Get them right through. Pull them right through the trim board and sand the inside here a little bit after, and it's all get covered by paint. So we won't even see them. Okay, pulled the nails right through that were in the wrong spots. Get it out of there. And now we need to do the bottom trim. Trim along the bottom edge. Piece of piece of wood that I got. I ran a router down it. It's just a thin strip of pine, about probably 10 feet long. And I've run a router bit down it, made a little bit of a molding out of it, I guess. And now we need to cut that so it will be the right size. So I'm going to make it a little bit longer than it needs to be, this piece, and then I'll trim it to size after we get things lined up. Longer than we need. It's good. Now we've got our pieces ready here. We'll mark them for length. Mark these pieces for length now. Just put this on here and we'll line it up so that our edges all match up. Very nice. That's pretty decent there. So we'll mark it for length now, so we can cut it off. Just use this screw to scribe it. And cut it off. And we'll mark the other side. Up again like that, and we'll like that. Line it off with the saw again. I found I needed these shorter nails. Looking all over for them. Have them sitting on another table. Take these out. Stuck in there. And we'll put these smaller nails in. This thing on the nail. Close it up. Now we'll glue these pieces and nail them in place. Probably easier to do it this way. From the backside into this little strip. And, this one on this end. I sometimes cut a molding that would actually cap the edge of this plywood, but this plywood doesn't look too bad from here. I sand this, I paint, and I'll ease the edge a little bit with some sandpaper later, and you won't notice this much when it's all done. And you fill in the gaps with some caulking or filler, and when you're done painting, this line will pretty much disappear. But sometimes I'll actually cut my molding that I make to cap that so you won't see it. Especially if I'm using a 1/2-inch plywood where it's much thicker, then you get a lot better finish. And I just make a little lip that's about a 3/16 of an inch, maybe as little as an 1/8 of an inch, just to cover that edge of the plywood. And when you glue it on there, it makes that disappear. But that's only if it's like a 1/2-inch plywood. Usually something this thin that you can probably just fill it in and it'll look quite good when it's done. So we'll take this piece again, line this up. We've got some glue on it, and we'll match that up so that the seam is quite small. We've got that ready. We'll line this up here so that we can get our nails in there. And we'll nail. And we'll try nail into a thicker spot there. That was okay. And we'll try and get this one the same. And we've got it. Got that nailed on, glue's in there, and that should dry on there quite nicely. So now we'll put on the other edge, the other end, and we will line that up again with this other piece of molding again, so it lines up properly. Place. And that worked out pretty good. So we've got that nailed in place, and now we can line this up. And that lines up there quite good. And we'll just scribe it over here where we want this to be cut off at, or the and we'll adjust this to the 45-degree angle. And we'll try and cut that off to match it. So again, I'm not exactly on the mark, but I will keep cutting until I'm adjusted. I see I need about a blade width again, and I still have my mark on there. It's about right where that would have been. So I will cut off that little bit. And now, hopefully this will be right on the money. And that is perfect, but it'll have to do. So we'll go with it. Probably not really perfect, but it's as close as I'm going to get. So we'll put some glue on that and we'll nail it in place. All right, we've got this
Valance finished assembling, and this is what it looks like before we paint. We still have the holes to fill in on it and some gaps and whatnot, but we've got it nailed together and it should be fairly strong. We'll paint it up and make it look like the other ones. That's what they're going to look like, I guess.